My name is Morgan Reynolds. I'm 35 years old, standing in my parents' backyard in Connecticut, and watching my older sister Natalie command the attention of every single guest like it's her own stage. That familiar weight settles in my gut again, the same ache I've felt since childhood. For 2 decades, she's thrived on subtle digs and public digs. But what Natalie doesn't realize is that while she's preparing to take one final shot at me, I'm holding the deed to her dream in my coat pocket. There's a certain elegance in a quiet kind of revenge, the kind that doesn't shout, but permanently shifts power. Before I get into how I flip the script, leave a comment sharing where you're tuning in from, and hit that subscribe button. If you've ever had to survive someone else's spotlight just to find your own, growing up under the same roof as Natalie Reynolds was like constantly breathing secondhand smoke. It lingered, clung, and no matter how far I ran, it followed. 2 years my senior, she had an early head start on being the center of attention, and she milked it. Our family wasn't wealthy, but comfortable. Dad was an engineer who clocked in daily and never missed a soccer game. Mom taught 2nd grade and filled our home with warmth. They valued hard work, honesty, and grace. Somehow, those values settled in us very differently. I followed rules, saved money, built vision boards before I could even drive. While my friends splurged on mall trips, I socked away every dollar from babysitting jobs into a college fund I started myself. My room was spotless. My ambitions were simple: earn a degree, start something of my own, and never depend on anyone else. Natalie? She gravitated toward designer handbags and weekend getaways. Her energy was performative, everything had to sparkle, including her social circle. If I was a spreadsheet, she was a press release. I'll never forget 4th grade, the science fair. I'd built a terrarium complete with miniature water cycles and hand-drawn diagrams. My teacher called it graduate-level work. That night, I overheard Natalie telling classmates she practically built it for me. Claimed I'd struggled with the concepts. I swallowed the insult and stayed silent. That became our dynamic: she'd take credit, I'd stay quiet. By the time we reached high school, it was routine. My accomplishments were either minimized or reframed as group efforts with Natalie as the driving force. I earned a partial scholarship to Cornell. She told our cousins she'd edited my essays and helped with my portfolio. When I walked across the stage with honors and a business degree, she told guests I was just following her lead. Never mind, she dropped out of community college after 6 weeks. Our parents were kind, but they never truly intervened. Dad always said, "Try not to take it personally," and Mom just smiled and chalked it up to Natalie's unique way of expressing herself. I understood they didn't want conflict, but their reluctance to confront her behavior only enabled it. The peace they tried to keep came at my expense. After graduation, I bootstrapped an e-commerce company from nothing. I found a niche in eco-conscious home goods and worked myself raw, 16-hour days, nights on an air mattress, and instant noodles as luxury meals. Every penny I made was reinvested. Meanwhile, Natalie bounced from boutiques to beauty counters, quitting when she got bored or criticized. Then my efforts started paying off. Slowly at first, then exponentially. Within 3 years, I had a full-time staff and my profits were climbing. By the 5th year, Entrepreneur magazine ran a profile on me. That's when Natalie flipped the script again. She told everyone she'd always believed in my potential and loved mentoring me through the hard years. She'd never been part of a single meeting, never even visited my office. Yet at every holiday, she played the part of my cheerleader. Carefully inserting herself into my narrative, she made herself look like the wise older sibling who had guided me with love and tough lessons. To relatives, she became my silent partner. To me, she was still the same spotlight-hungry manipulator. But I was no longer the timid girl who swallowed my words. And she had no idea what I had planned for her next. Over time, I learned to pick my moments and protect my peace. Unlike Natalie, who flaunted a flashy lifestyle she could barely sustain, complete with overpriced apartments and shiny new cars every other year, I opted for stability. My modest townhouse wasn't Instagram-worthy, but it was mine. My car wasn't flashy, but it never failed me. I chose compound interest over clout. While she measured success in designer tags and Instagram likes, I built wealth quietly: retirement accounts, rainy day funds, diversified investments. She thought I was frugal out of necessity. I let her believe that. 3 summers back, during a trip to Lake Winnipegosis in New Hampshire, Natalie fell in love with a house. It wasn't just any house, though. A 5-bedroom stunner perched on a private shoreline, complete with a dock and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. It was everything she fantasized about owning but could never afford. The listing sat at $1.2 million, miles outside her financial reality. That didn't stop her from pretending otherwise. She filmed walkthroughs during the open house like she was already picking out drapes. She even told my mom she'd host Thanksgiving there someday. Since then, at every family dinner, Natalie would bring it up again. My lake house, she'd sigh, like she'd lost a birthright. The house sold, of course, to someone else. But the fantasy lived on in her mind. What no one realized, however, was that 6 months ago, I hit a rough patch in my business. A key supplier filed for bankruptcy, leaving my fulfillment pipeline in chaos. Customers were frustrated, and I was issuing refunds left and right. To make matters worse, a platform algorithm change buried my top-selling listings. Sales plummeted. I wasn't going under, but cash flow tightened drastically. I secured a bridge loan to stay afloat and started trimming expenses. It was humbling, somehow, because nothing stays secret around Natalie. She sniffed out my struggles. I suspect she snooped during a casual visit. I once caught her nosing through my paperwork when I stepped out of the room. At the time, I brushed it off. Now, I regretted that leniency. Then fate dealt me a wild card. By total coincidence, the same lakefront home, the one Natalie obsessed over, returned to the market. A bitter divorce had forced the owners to sell quickly, and the asking price had dropped significantly to $950,000. The moment I saw the listing, something inside me shifted. An idea took root. Was it petty? Absolutely. But it also felt earned. I contacted the agent immediately. The owners wanted a fast, clean deal. I crunched the numbers obsessively for 3 nights straight, looping in my financial advisor, double-checking with my accountant. The cost was steep. I'd have to liquidate a sizable chunk of my portfolio. The emergency savings I'd guarded for a decade would be gone. But the opportunity was too symbolic to ignore. I formed an LLC to keep my identity off the deed, wired the funds, and locked it down. The closing date? The very same weekend as our annual Reynolds family gathering. I kept telling myself this wasn't about getting even. It was about drawing a line after years of being walked over. But in quiet moments, I questioned my own motives. Was I really reclaiming power, or just mimicking her tactics, using status and property as currency? Our family reunions are legendary. In our corner of Connecticut. They've been happening longer than I've been alive. Picnic tables line the backyard. Distant cousins reconnect over charred burgers and fresh lemonade. There are always kids chasing each other through the garden while adults pass around stories from decades past. Normally, I look forward to it. It's tradition, but this year felt different. I parked in my parents' driveway and took a deep breath. The air was thick with anticipation, and not just because of my business troubles. I had laid off 3 employees, halted 2 product launches, and was rebuilding my supply chain from the ground up. Things weren't crumbling, but they weren't solid either. Still, I wasn't showing up empty-handed. I had something in my pocket that would shift the balance between Natalie and me forever. Someone like Natalie, who understood business the way most people understand astrophysics. Typical entrepreneurial setbacks looked like total collapse. She never grasped the difference between short-term turbulence and long-term vision. Before stepping out of the car, I checked my phone again. Still no update from the real estate agent. The final signatures were due any moment, and the timing couldn't have been tighter. I exhaled slowly and grabbed the tray of goat cheese tarts I'd prepped the night before. If nothing else, I could still show up gracious and composed. Morgan. You made it. My mother appeared from around the side gate, floral sundress catching in the breeze. She hugged me tightly, the familiar scent of her citrus perfume mixing with sunscreen. Everyone's here already, even Jenna flew in from Seattle. Her voice bubbled with excitement. The yard had been transformed, as it was every July. Fold out. Tables curved in a wide U-shape across the lawn, balloons swayed on string ties, and Dad stood proudly beside his smoking grill like a general at his post. About 40 relatives filled the space, sipping punch, balancing overstuffed plates, and dodging the backyard sprinkler that never quite pointed in the right direction. "Where's Natalie?" I asked as I placed my appetizers on the already crowded buffet. I tried to sound casual, but I caught the micro-expression flash across Mom's face. She hesitated. "Oh, she's around. Think she's inside chatting with Aunt Patricia. She's been acting all mysterious, says she has some major news she wants to share later." My shoulders tightened. The announcement. Whatever it was, I knew better than to trust it was harmless. "I'm sure it's nothing." Mom added quickly. "Maybe she finally got promoted at the department store." I smiled weakly and nodded. "Sure. That must be it." As I wove through the guests, warm greetings met me like waves. Cousin Tyler cornered me for internship advice for his daughter. Uncle George gushed about his new bamboo floors, an idea he'd lifted straight from my product catalog. Aunt Marin was eager for tips on launching her Etsy shop. Normally, I'd love these interactions. Being recognized for my expertise gave me joy. Today, though, it felt distant. My thoughts kept drifting. I scanned the lawn for Natalie, heart ticking like a metronome. I spotted her eventually, near the cooler by the drinks. She stood with our cousin Rachel and Aunt Patricia, eyes darting between them and me. When she saw me looking, she beamed, too wide, too forced, and waved like we were best friends at a high school reunion. Then she whispered something, and both women turned toward me with the kind of pity usually reserved for funeral homes. "Don't let her rattle you," came a voice behind me. I turned to find my cousin Emma offering a glass of Chardonnay. She was the only person I'd told about my business hurdles. As a CPA and business owner herself, she'd quietly helped me refinance one of my loans and review my cash flow projections. "Whatever she's planning," Emma said, "it's about her insecurity, not your reality." I took the glass gratefully. "I know. I just don't understand why she's still like this. We're in our mid-30s. Shouldn't this dynamic have expired by now?" Emma gave a dry laugh. "In functional families, maybe. But Natalie's entire self-worth is tied to one-upping you. And the fact that you've actually built something while she's still spinning her wheels? That burns her more than you'll ever realize." Before I could reply, Dad's deep voice rang out, calling everyone to gather for lunch. As usual, Mom had printed name cards and arranged seats like it was a wedding reception. Of course, I was placed directly across from Natalie. Because of course I was, she was already holding court by the time I sat down, recounting her fabulous weekend in the Hamptons, hosted by some anonymous friend whose name she conveniently omitted. Her outfit was a loud cry for attention, head-to-toe designer, with the price tag likely still stuffed in her purse for a post-party return. The sunglasses perched on her head were probably worth more than her monthly rent. "Morgan," she exclaimed, her voice exaggerated with mock delight. "I was just telling everyone about this brilliant investment opportunity I've been exploring. Real estate is where the real money is, don't you agree?" The way she said it was loaded, bait. On a hook. My chest tightened. Could she know? No. The deal wasn't public, and I'd been meticulous about privacy. She was fishing. "It can be," I answered smoothly, scooping potato salad onto my plate. "If you understand the risk involved." She leaned in theatrically, lowering her voice just enough to ensure everyone nearby still heard her. "Well, I've been doing some reading on economic preparedness," Natalie said, swirling her wine like a financial guru. "It's essential to diversify before downturns strike. So many ventures collapse simply because they weren't built to last." A ripple of discomfort passed through nearby relatives. The underlying jab in her words didn't go unnoticed. I felt a flush rise along my neck, but I held steady, lifting my glass with composure and sipping slowly. If she was hoping for a visible reaction, she'd be disappointed. The meal continued under a thin veil of politeness. I noticed side glances from several relatives, expressions I recognized too well: pity, concern, speculation. Cousin Derek leaned over and asked with performative casualness how my work was holding up. Aunt Patricia chimed in next, suggesting she knew someone hiring office assistants, in case I wanted something a little more secure. By the time dessert arrived, I was emotionally drained. Smiling through passive aggression was exhausting. I excused myself and retreated to the powder room just off the main hallway. The moment the door clicked shut, I exhaled hard and checked my phone. One new message. It was from the real estate agent. "Final documents ready. 9 a.m. tomorrow for signatures. Congrats on your new lake property." An unexpected calm swept over me. Whatever my sister had cooked up for today's big performance, I had my own secret now, one that would rewrite her script entirely. I looked in the mirror and squared my shoulders, adjusting a curl that had escaped my updo. Then I stepped back out into the chaos with quiet resolve. Uncle Robert was lingering by the dessert table, cutting into one of Mom's blueberry pies with laser focus. He looked up and nodded at me, his gaze always sharper than it seemed. "She's on a mission today," he said without preamble. "Apparently," I replied, grabbing a brownie. "Any clue what she's about to announce?" "No," I said, "but judging by all the whispering, nothing good." He grunted. "You know, after 40 years of marriage to your Aunt Linda, I've learned one thing: people who tear others down usually feel like they're sinking." I smiled at him, genuinely grateful. "You're right. I just wish," a sharp clink interrupted my sentence. The unmistakable sound of silver on glass. Every head turned toward the center of the yard, where Natalie stood, spoon raised like she was about to deliver a royal decree. "If I could have everyone's attention," she called, her face flushed with excitement, eyes gleaming with the thrill of performance. Conversations died. Plates were set down. Forks stilled. "I just want to thank Mom and Dad for another perfect reunion," she began, gesturing with her wineglass. They smiled up at her, completely unaware of the ambush about to unfold. "Family means the world to me. Which is why, when someone close to us is hurting, it's important we acknowledge it with compassion." A hush fell over the group. I froze, already anticipating where this was going but unable to stop it. Natalie's eyes locked on mine, and the sickly sweet expression on her face made my stomach churn. You may have noticed Morgan seems quieter than usual today. That's because she's going through a difficult time, one she's been too proud to share. Gasps began filtering through the crowd. Whispers rustled like leaves. It absolutely breaks my heart, she said, voice catching just enough to seem believable, but she's lost everything. Her company has filed for bankruptcy. The word hung in the summer air like a bad smell. Heads whipped toward me. Some faces showed concern. Others were tinged with curiosity. No one looked away. I found the legal paperwork last week, Natalie added, her tone oozing fake sorrow. She conveniently left out how she'd obtained that so-called paperwork, likely from my home office, snooping through personal files. She's had to forfeit inventory, shut down operations, and now the bank is going over her personal accounts. It's devastating. My mother gasped, placing her hand to her lips. Morgan, she whispered. Sweetheart, is this true? I opened my mouth to respond, but Natalie steamrolled ahead. She didn't want to admit it. Mom. You know how proud she is of that little business. But we're family, there's no shame here. Only love. She had the gall to make herself the hero of her own hit job. The way she called my decade of work a little business, while violating my privacy. In front of dozens of people. It was malicious brilliance. I've already offered her the spare room at my place, she continued, her voice honeyed with self-importance. And I've contacted a few friends about job openings. Maybe this will be a healthy opportunity for her to experience a structured work environment for a change. The performance was flawless. If you didn't know her, you might have even called it kind, but I did know her, and she had no idea just how spectacularly this story was about to flip. More stability, less chaos. The phrase echoed in my head, Natalie's exact words from 3 years ago, when she'd laughed in my face after I offered her a job in customer support. She had just been let go, again, and I had extended an opportunity to help. Her response? That she could never work beneath her baby sister. Now here she was, painting herself as my savior in front of the entire extended family. Dad pushed back his chair, face tight with concern. Morgan, why didn't you tell us what was going on? We could have supported you. Every gaze zeroed in on me. I could feel the weight of confusion, judgment, pity, all of it. And all of it based on a lie, the reality? I was not bankrupt. Sure, my company had been navigating a rough quarter, supplier issues, digital visibility hits, but we were already climbing out of it. My new partnerships were stronger, and our revised marketing strategy had begun turning things around. But explaining that now would sound like desperate damage control. No one listens to the truth when the scandal is juicier. I inhaled slowly. Thanks for your concern, truly, but Natalie doesn't have accurate information. I met my sisters. Eyes without blinking. My company is undergoing restructuring, not collapse. Everything's under control. Her expression flickered. Just for a second. But she recovered. Oh, Morgan, she said, voice syrupy. It's okay to pretend. You're fine. But I've seen the documents. She threw out the term, Chapter 11, with surgical precision, just enough to sound credible, not dramatic. A few heads nodded. People love specifics, even if they're fabricated. I could feel the narrative slipping out of my hands. Maybe we should take this conversation elsewhere? I suggested, trying to stay composed. We're all family, she replied loudly, gesturing to the group like she was hosting a TED Talk. No shame in failure. Everyone warned you about growing too fast, remember? That was rich. Natalie had never offered caution, only criticism for how slow I'd moved. Her revisionist history was stunning. I stood up without another word and walked toward the house. Eyes followed. Judgments whispered behind napkins. I in the quiet of the kitchen. I steadied myself against the counter. My phone buzzed. A message from Emma, want me to accidentally spill wine on her dress. Despite the chaos, I laughed. Then another ping. This time from my agent, final contract attached. Review before tomorrow signing, and just like that. The storm outside seemed manageable. Uncle Robert stepped in, closing the door gently behind him. He didn't speak right away. Just stood there, watching me with those steady eyes that always saw more than they let on. She really put on a show today, he said finally. She's committed, I answered dryly. He sat down, motioning for me to do the same. You've always been the quiet one. Natalie's the peacock, feathers, noise, spectacle. But you? You're the owl. Sharp, silent, underestimated. I exhaled. Didn't feel very wise today. He leaned forward. Look, I don't believe any of that bankruptcy nonsense. But even if it were true, who cares? You think your value in this family is tied to dollar signs. His words caught me off guard. For so long, my entire identity had been built in opposition to hers. She flaunted, I focused. She cut corners, I worked late nights. Maybe in trying not to become her, I had limited myself. Thanks, Uncle Robert, I said quietly. He smiled. So what's the plan? I hesitated, then nodded. Tomorrow. First thing. Good. Now come outside before your mother starts organizing a GoFundMe. We walked back out just as Natalie launched into a new monologue, telling the crowd how she'd already compiled a list of opportunities for me, jobs, housing, maybe even a mentorship. The audacity was endless. I took my seat, grabbed a fork, and calmly ate a piece of pie. Every word she said only made what I had planned for the morning feel sweeter. The rest of the afternoon played out like an extended family therapy session I never signed up for. Distant cousins emerged from the woodwork with business advice and backup plans. People who hadn't said my name in years were suddenly recruiters, career coaches, or part-time spiritual guides. By the lemonade station, Aunt Diane cornered me with alarming enthusiasm. Sweetheart, have you considered essential oils? My neighbor's daughter is thriving in direct sales, 6 figures, minimal effort. I just nodded, offering the kind of polite smile people give strangers on airplanes. Let them believe what they wanted, because in less than 24 hours, the story would flip. And Natalie, she'd never see it coming. Before I could reply, Aunt Diane slipped a trifold brochure into my palm, beaming like she'd just handed me a golden ticket. The glossy cover advertised a wellness pyramid scheme involving lavender oils and motivational webinars. Behind her, Cousin Greg chimed in with an unsolicited offer to review my company's finances, this from the same guy who'd run 3 ventures into the ground before age 35. Meanwhile, Uncle Stephen launched into a painstaking explanation of how unemployment insurance worked, his tone slow and exaggerated, as if I were a toddler struggling with ABCs. Across the yard, Natalie moved like a smug cloud of faux empathy and poorly disguised triumph. When near me, she acted concerned, soft frowns, tilted head, hand on heart. When she thought I wasn't watching, the edges of her lips curled upward, eyes glinting with satisfaction. She'd cast herself as both the voice of hard truths and the benevolent sister extending a lifeline to the family's black sheep. Morgan, she announced loudly as several relatives circled nearby. I've been thinking, we should go through my closet when you move in. I have some interview clothes you could use. Very classy, very polished. Her words stung, not just for their condescension but for the crowd she carefully selected as witnesses. The insinuation that I'd need her second-hand clothes, a woman whose wardrobe was more about labels than quality, wasn't lost on anyone. I gave her a clipped nod and walked away. My parents stood nearby, visibly torn. Mom kept piling extra food onto my plate like she thought I might be skipping meals, while Dad mumbled something about dipping into his retirement savings if it came to that. Their concern came from love, but their uncritical acceptance of Natalie's story cut deep. They didn't even ask me first. As twilight approached, tiki torches flickered to life around the property. I wandered to the edge of the lawn where an old wooden swing still hung from the same maple tree it had when I was a child. That spot had always been my hiding place, my retreat whenever Natalie's needling pushed too far. Tonight, it felt like time hadn't moved at all. Mind if I join you? Emma's voice pulled me from my thoughts. She appeared with 2 glasses of wine and slid into the swing beside me without waiting for a reply. Remember that Christmas when Natalie told everyone you still wet the bed? She asked with a sly grin. Oh God, I groaned, laughing despite myself. I was 9. And the rest of the holiday was adults whispering and checking my sheets. Emma sipped her drink, eyes twinkling. But then the next summer, she built that secret fort in the woods. I smirked. And got a full-body poison ivy rash after I casually pointed out that plants with 3 leaves should be avoided. Emma raised her glass in salute. You've always been patient and precise. That's why I know you'll get through this, too. My phone buzzed. Natalie's name lit up the screen. I silenced the call. Speak of the devil, I muttered. Emma noticed and chuckled. Oh? Incoming drama at 3 o'clock, she whispered, squeezing my arm before disappearing back toward the house. Sure enough, Natalie spotted me and marched over with practiced determination. She settled herself onto the swing, her designer dress looking absurdly out of place against the aged wood and rusty chains. Up close, I could see the cracks in her facade, tightness at the corners of her eyes, a smile stretched just a bit too wide. You've been avoiding me, she said with mock injury. Can you blame me? She brushed my response aside. You're being too sensitive. I was just telling the truth. The family deserved transparency. I turned to face her squarely. You mean you went through confidential paperwork, misunderstood it, and then made a public spectacle out of something that wasn't even accurate? That's the honesty you're defending? She bristled. I saw the bankruptcy filings, Morgan. Stop pretending. You saw legal drafts. Contingency planning. Not finalized documents. My lawyer prepared those as a precaution, not because I needed to file. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, but she regrouped quickly. Well, either way, the family needed to be informed. I've already told them you'll be staying with me while you get things sorted. It's not much, but my spare room will have to do. Better than nothing, I suppose. The malice, wrapped in artificial generosity, hit like a punch. This wasn't concern. She didn't want me to recover, she wanted me beneath her, dependent, diminished in the eyes of everyone who once admired me. I'm not moving in with you, I said firmly. My company is still operational, my house is paid off. And I don't need saving. Least of all from someone who weaponizes help for applause. She stood slowly, smoothing her hem like she'd just concluded a charity visit. We'll see, she said with the kind of smile only a rival could perfect, and with that, she turned and walked back toward the twinkling lights and murmured conversations. Leaving me on the swing, no longer hiding, just waiting for morning. Waiting for my move. I've already made an appointment with a financial consultant for Monday, Natalie declared, loud enough for nearby relatives to overhear. We need to explore Morgan's options. I'm not going to let her refuse support just because of misplaced pride. She strolled off, smug as ever, and seconds later, my phone buzzed. A new notification lit up the screen. Natalie had just messaged the entire family group chat. So worried about Morgan. She's really struggling and doesn't want to admit it. If anyone knows of job openings, please send them my way. She's too proud to ask herself. I stared at the message, watching as comments of concern, advice, and uninvited suggestions rolled in like an avalanche. Sympathy poured from relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years, thanks to a live broadcast. Like a PSA. Even as the party dwindled and chairs were folded away, Natalie's campaign of humiliation persisted. Her desperation to see me brought low was no longer subtle. It was a mission. Later that evening, I stood at the kitchen sink helping Mom with the dishes. She wiped down plates while I rinsed. After a long pause, she finally broached the subject. Sweetheart, what Natalie said, how much of it is true? I placed a dripping platter on the drying rack and turned toward her. Mom, do you really think if I were filing for bankruptcy, you'd first hear about it from Natalie, at a reunion? She blinked, cheeks flushing. I guess not, but she sounded so sure. And you've been quiet lately. I've been dealing with supplier issues, which we've already resolved. Natalie misrepresented the situation and shared private documents that don't even reflect reality. Instead of checking with me, everyone just assumed she was telling the truth. Mom folded the towel in her hands, her brow creased with concern. You know how she gets, she's always had trouble with your success. That old excuse, again. My jaw tightened. That's not sensitivity, Mom. It's malice. Before she could respond, my phone rang. I stepped onto the back porch to answer. Morgan. Everything's finalized, the real estate agent chirped. We're set for 9 a.m. sharp tomorrow. The house is empty, you'll get the keys right after signing. As the call ended, I caught sight of Natalie across the yard. She was watching me, eyes narrowed, suspicion clearly flickering behind her expression. In that exact moment, clarity settled in my bones. This lake house wouldn't just be a smart financial investment. It would be the battleground for a long overdue reckoning between sisters. The next morning broke golden and still, one of those pristine summer Sundays New England is known for. Despite barely sleeping, I got up early and dressed with care, white blouse, navy slacks, subtle earrings. The look was polished, deliberate. Not flashy, but unmistakably competent. Downstairs, I found Dad at the breakfast table with his usual Sunday crossword puzzle. He looked up, startled by my outfit. Dressed up for a weekend, he remarked, setting his pen aside. I've got a business meeting, I replied, pouring myself coffee. He gave me a look I'd seen countless times, half concern, half confusion. Morgan, about yesterday. If things are hard right now, your mother and I want to help. We're not judging. I took the seat across from him and wrapped both hands around my mug. Dad, listen carefully. I am not going bankrupt. We had a hiccup, but the business is recovering. What Natalie said was not only wrong, it was invasive and damaging. He looked down at the puzzle, brows drawn low. But she said she saw documents. She saw drafts. Contingency plans. Legal backups that were never used. If you don't believe me, I'll have my accountant walk you through the numbers. His eyes flicked up to mine, shame creeping into his features. I should have asked you directly. Yes, I said softly, you should have. But that's been the pattern for years, hasn't it? You and Mom extend Natalie every benefit of the doubt. I'm always the one told to stay calm, keep the peace. I've had enough of that. The silence between us grew thick with everything left unspoken over decades. Finally, he exhaled and gave a quiet nod. You're right. We've let her get away with too much when it came to you. I'm sorry, Morgan. The weight of those Words landed with surprising force. I hadn't realized how deeply I needed to hear them. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Thank you. He cleared his throat. So, what's this meeting? A property deal, I replied. I'm meeting the agent at 9. As I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, my phone buzzed once again. It was another group message from Natalie, taking Morgan to brunch today to talk through her next steps. We'll update everyone after. My lip curled into a slow smile. Sure. You will, Natalie. But not the way you think. So thankful for all your love during this hard chapter in Morgan's life. The message was pure theater. I hadn't agreed to any brunch, let alone appointed Natalie my spokesperson. Yet she was doubling down, framing herself as my guiding light while spinning a narrative I never consented to. My jaw clenched as I fired off a quick reply. Actually, I have a meeting this morning. Let's reschedule. Her response came in seconds. What meeting? Financial consultants don't work Sundays. Stop pushing people away. Let us help. I didn't bother replying in the group thread. I opened a private message instead. Meet me at 10:30 a.m. at the Starbucks on Lakeshore Drive in Winnipegosis. Just you and me. We need to talk. I could practically feel her self-satisfaction radiating through the screen. She probably assumed I was finally surrendering, asking for rescue. Of course, sis. I'll be there for you, always. Her message practically dripped with condescension. I left before the sun fully rose, coasting down the highway with the manila folder of finalized contracts in the passenger seat. The drive to Lake Winnipegosis was just under 2 hours, and I used every minute to clear my mind. No music. No podcasts. Just focus. When I reached the real estate office, my nerves were gone, replaced with clarity. Closing the deal was oddly anticlimactic. Sign here. Initial here. Wire the funds. By 9:15 a.m., I held the keys to my new property. Congratulations, Ms. Reynolds. The house is officially yours. I followed the winding lakeside road until I reached a stone mailbox marked #945. My tires crunched across the gravel driveway, curving toward a breathtaking cedar and glass retreat. The wraparound porch hugged the front, while towering windows overlooked the still blue water. Sunlight glinted off the boathouse dock just beyond the trees. It was peaceful. Timeless. And mine. Unlocking the front door, I stepped into the great room, where sunlight poured across polished wood floors and a massive stone fireplace anchored the space. The previous owners had left behind tasteful furniture, giving the house an effortless, lived-in charm. Granite countertops gleamed in the kitchen. Upstairs, the primary suite offered lake views that stretched for miles and a bathroom that felt like a 5-star spa. This wasn't just a lesson for Natalie. This was a gift I hadn't known I needed. At 10:15 a.m., I texted her again, change of plans. Meet me at 145 Lakeshore Drive. Not Starbucks, she replied immediately. Where is that? Plug it into your GPS. You'll find me. I brewed a pot of coffee, poured 2 mugs, and carried them out to the porch swing facing the water. The breeze whispered through pine trees, and the lake glistened like a mirror. I sat back, waiting for her, the keys resting beside me. At precisely 10:42, typical Natalie, I heard a car crunch up the drive. Her red BMW convertible pulled up behind my sedan. She stepped out, stilettos catching on the stones, scanning the house like she'd stepped into a dream that didn't make sense. Her brows furrowed as she marched up the porch stairs. Morgan, what's going on? Whose house is this? I motioned to the swing beside me. Grab a seat. I made coffee. She stayed standing, clearly thrown. Wait, seriously, what is this place? Are you dog sitting? House sitting? What's going on? I smiled into my cup. You don't recognize it? Strange. You've talked about this place for years. Said it was your dream home, remember? Her lips parted. She spun slowly, taking in the view again, then gasped as recognition dawned. This is the lake house? The one that sold 3 years ago? It came back on the market a few weeks ago. Divorce sale. I held out a set of keys. Want the grand tour? She didn't take them. Just stared. You bought this? How? You're bankrupt. There it was. The slip. The exposed truth. I met her eyes calmly. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. I'm not bankrupt, Natalie. Never was. She stood frozen, lips parted, hands fidgeting with her sunglasses, processing the realization that every lie she'd spread was about to crumble under the weight of hard, beautiful facts. The storyline she had so carefully curated, heroic, selfless sister swooping in to rescue her floundering sibling, was unraveling right in front of her. But I saw the documents, she murmured, her usual commanding tone faltering. They were precautionary drafts, I said flatly, placing the keys on the side table between us. A supplier defaulted on us. Temporary setback. We've already rebounded. With a better vendor and a smarter outreach plan. Natalie dropped onto the porch swing beside me, her designer handbag clenched like a security blanket. So, you're not coming to live with me? No, Natalie. That was never even a consideration. She blinked. But then why didn't you correct me? Why let me tell everyone that, let you? My voice rose before I caught it, the frustration I'd buried since the reunion bubbling up. You went through confidential files without asking. You misunderstood what you saw. And you made a public declaration, without ever speaking to me. Her cheeks flushed, embarrassment briefly visible before it hardened into her usual deflection. I was just trying to be supportive. I thought you needed someone to step in. Really? I countered, narrowing my gaze. Because it looked an awful lot like you enjoyed parading as my savior while I squirmed under scrutiny. She didn't reply. She didn't have to. Her silence said more than any denial ever could. I softened my tone. This, whatever this thing is between us, it's gone on too long. I've ignored it. I've avoided confrontation. But I'm done pretending it doesn't exist. She stared at the lake, refusing to meet my eyes. You've always been the perfect one, Morgan. The clever one. The competent one. Do you have any idea how hard that is to live with? I almost laughed. My shadow? Are you serious? You've built your identity around outshining me. The cars, the handbags, the constant passive-aggressive comments about my little business, you made it your mission to appear more successful. That's not fair, she said, though her voice lacked conviction, isn't it? I asked. You could have come to me privately. Instead, you took center stage at a family event and broadcasted a false crisis. Why? She looked down at her manicured fingers. I waited because it finally looked like I was ahead. She admitted quietly. Everyone always looks at you like you've got it all figured out. You make it look effortless. It's not. I struggle constantly, I said, handing her a tissue. But I don't define myself based on how you're doing. And for what it's worth, this house was a huge financial leap. I emptied out emergency reserves, sold stock. This wasn't a casual purchase. She dabbed her cheeks, careful not to ruin her eyeliner. Then why buy it? I gestured at the tranquil lake view. Partly for investment. Waterfront real estate holds value. But honestly? Partly because I was tired of hearing you call it your dream, while undermining mine. When it came back on the market, I wanted to prove to you, and to myself, that your version of our story isn't the only one that matters. A tiny laugh escaped her. Okay, that's kind of savage. I chuckled. Call it setting boundaries. Dramatically. So now what? She asked, motioning toward the house. You own the dream. Does that mean I'm permanently uninvited? Her question lingered longer than I expected. That depends on you, I said finally. This wasn't about cutting ties. It was about breaking a cycle. I wanted to stop playing the role you wrote for me. I rose and moved to the railing, gazing out across the glittering water. The truth is, I said, voice quieter now, I've missed my sister. Not the version of her who exposed me in front of our entire family or downplayed everything I'd ever achieved, but the girl who made me laugh so hard at the breakfast table milk came out my nose. The one who showed me how to French braid my hair, who crawled into bed with me during loud thunderstorms and whispered jokes until I fell asleep. When I turned back from the railing, I saw her watching me with an unfamiliar expression, unguarded, raw. There was no script behind her eyes, no performance. Just vulnerability. I miss her too, she said, voice low. Then let's try something different, I offered. No more pretending. Just complete honesty, starting right now. Why did you tell everyone I was bankrupt? She exhaled, letting her purse fall onto the swing beside her. Because I'm drowning, Morgan. My cards are maxed out. I'm months behind on car payments. Work put me on notice because my numbers are slipping. Everything's falling apart. And when I found those forms, it felt like, for once, I had the upper hand. Like I wasn't the failure. Her confession dropped between us like a stone into still water. It was maybe the most honest thing she'd said to me in years. Thank you, I said quietly. Why didn't you just tell me all of that? Why not ask for help? I couldn't. She burst out. I'm the older one. I'm supposed to have it figured out. You run a real company, Morgan. I fold sweaters at 37. How was I supposed to admit that I'm falling apart? I eased back onto the swing beside her. Success isn't a job title or a paycheck. And it's definitely not about who's ahead between sisters. Easy for you to say, she mumbled, though it wasn't bitter. Just tired, is it? I haven't taken a proper break in 5 years. I work 70 hours a week. My last relationship ended because I chose meetings over dinner dates. There are areas of my life where I'm barely holding it together. She blinked, surprised, as if it had never crossed her mind that I might be struggling too. Guess we've both been telling ourselves stories that don't quite line up with reality, I said. She nodded slowly, eyes softening. So here's what I'm thinking, I continued. There are 5 bedrooms here. One is mine. Another could be yours, under a few conditions. Her eyebrows shot up. You'd let me stay here? After all that? If, and only if, you agree to a few rules, I said with a slight smile. First, no more public callouts or rewriting my story. Second, we start being real with each other about money, stress, and everything in between. And third, you tell the family the truth about what happened at the reunion. She winced. They'll think I'm awful. They'll think you made a mistake. And if you own it, they'll respect that. She sat in silence, weighing it all. Then, with a quiet breath, she nodded. And in return, I get to use this gorgeous place? I grinned. More than that. You get a real shot at rebuilding something we lost a long time ago, being actual sisters again. Not rivals. And I'll help you get your finances sorted. No guilt, no pity. Just solutions. For a second, I thought she might pull back out of pride. But her shoulders dropped. The armor slipped. I'd really like that, she said. I extended my hand. So, we have a deal? She bypassed the handshake and wrapped me in a full hug instead. Deal, she whispered. When she finally let go, I handed her the keys and motioned toward the house. Why don't you take the first look? I'll get more coffee going. While she wandered room to room, gasping over all the features she'd once fantasized about, I picked up my phone and called our parents. It was time the truth came from both of us. 2 weeks later, we invited the entire family, yes, the whole chaotic clan, back for another gathering. The invitation was signed by both of us, shocking everyone. Morgan and Natalie Reynolds request your presence. The great room filled quickly. Cousins and aunts and distant relatives hovered, unsure what exactly they'd shown up for. My parents arrived first, Mom's eyes wide as she took in the panoramic view. It's beautiful, she whispered, heading straight to the massive windows. When did this happen? The morning after the reunion, I said, hugging her. I'd been finalizing things for a while. Just didn't mention it until now. Dad walked over, running a hand along the polished built-in bookshelves, nodding in approval. Not exactly the kind of purchase someone facing bankruptcy would make, Dad remarked with a raised brow and a half-smile. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, Natalie entered the great room carrying a tray of appetizers she had clearly made herself. That alone was enough to surprise nearly every relative in attendance. Natalie in cooking? Practically unheard of. She looked different, too. Still polished, but toned down. No oversized sunglasses. No flashy jewelry or designer logo screaming for attention. Her outfit was simple, elegant, and uncharacteristically understated. As the room began to fill, so did the atmosphere with whispers and sidelong glances. Uncle Robert gave me a subtle nod of approval from across the room. Emma showed up with a chilled bottle of champagne, leaning in to murmur, "This better be good," before handing it off to me like popcorn at a movie theater. Once everyone had arrived and settled, Natalie gently tapped her glass with a spoon. The crystal chime brought a hush over the room. You could practically hear everyone hold their breath, expecting another dramatic twist. Her fingers trembled slightly as she stepped forward, but her voice was steady. "Thanks for being here," she began. "I invited you all today because I owe my sister, and all of you, an apology." A ripple of surprise ran through the space. Apologies and Natalie were rarely in the same sentence. At the reunion, I made a statement about Morgan's financial status that wasn't accurate, she continued, hands clasped in front of her. I found some legal paperwork while visiting her place, documents that her attorney drafted during a routine restructuring. I made assumptions and chose to share them, publicly, without speaking to her first. You could hear a pin drop. Our mother gasped faintly. Aunt Patricia whispered something to Uncle George. But Natalie pushed on. The truth is, Morgan's company hit a brief snag, but she already had a recovery plan in place. She didn't file for anything. She's thriving. In fact, she extended an arm, gesturing around the room. She bought this home the very next morning. Murmurs erupted. Shock, awe, confusion. All of it swirled around us as people began realizing the full picture. And yes, Natalie added, this is the same house I've dreamed of owning for years. When she closed on it, I felt jealous. Angry, even. But eventually, I realized that my resentment came from a place I hadn't dealt with. I've been comparing myself to Morgan for most of my life. That's on me. And I'm done letting that define our relationship. I stepped beside her then, standing shoulder to shoulder. Maybe for the first time in our adult lives, we invited everyone here, I said, because we want to move forward. No more secrets, no more assumptions. This place isn't about revenge or one-upping each other. We want it to be a space where our family comes together. Natalie nodded beside me. And Morgan has graciously offered to let me use the home. Too, even after everything. That's the kind of sister she's always been, and the kind I'm working on becoming. The authenticity in her words hit me hard. This wasn't a speech designed for applause or approval. This was real. Honest. Vulnerable. Dad cleared his throat, clearly moved. I think I speak for everyone when I say we're proud of you both, he said. That kind of honesty takes guts. The tension in the room loosened like a tight knot finally unraveling. Conversations flowed freely. Some relatives came up just to hug us. Others mumbled apologies for having believed the worst without even checking in. Uncle Robert wrapped both of us in a bear hug and whispered, "About time," before walking off to fix himself a drink. In the weeks that followed, the change wasn't instant. We still had moments. Natalie occasionally slipped into comparison mode, and I still found it hard to address conflict head-on. But the foundation had shifted. We were both different now. With some guidance from me, Natalie created her first realistic budget. She confronted her debt instead of pretending it didn't exist. Eventually, she landed a retail management position that actually made use of her strengths, her flair for style, her way with people, her natural charisma. Natalie still adored elegance, but something had shifted. She began distinguishing between genuine craftsmanship and the need to impress. Her style became less about flaunting wealth and more about appreciating substance. Meanwhile, my company didn't just bounce back, it soared. Partnering with new suppliers opened fresh opportunities. The crisis had forced us to refine our outreach, and ironically, the revamped strategy performed better than anything we'd used before. We posted record-breaking earnings that quarter. The lake house became everything I envisioned and more. It wasn't just a vacation spot, it evolved into a retreat for restoration. My parents celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary there with speeches, laughter, and happy tears. Our cousins visited with their kids, filling the place with laughter, bonfires, and cannonballs off the dock. Natalie and I created a new ritual, Sisters Weekends. Once a month, we'd meet, just the two of us, no phones, no pretenses, just honesty and connection. Slowly, conversation by conversation, we unraveled years of unspoken resentment and built something sturdier in its place. One golden evening, as we sat side by side on the dock, the lake shimmering in the sunset, Natalie broke the silence. "You could have used this house to shut me out completely. No one would have blamed you." I dipped my toes in the water, letting the quiet settle for a moment before replying. "I won't lie. I bought it while I was furious. But deep down, I think I wanted to end the cycle we'd been trapped in." She let out a breathy laugh. "Well, mission accomplished. Watching my bankrupt sister buy my dream house was the kind of reality check I didn't know I needed." I smiled. "The funny part? This place means more to me now than I ever thought it would. Not for the aesthetics. Not even the investment. It's what this house stands for. It's where we finally stopped pretending," she finished, nodding. The wind stirred softly through the pines. She turned to me, face illuminated by the last rays of sun. "You once said something about self-worth and comparison. That stuck with me. I've spent my entire life grading myself against other people's scorecards. Especially yours. It's a race no one ever wins," I replied gently. She nodded. "And it's exhausting. I'm learning to let go of that." As the sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the glassy surface of the lake, I realized something unexpected. This property, once just an idea sparked by frustration, had become something profoundly personal. It gave me back my sister. It taught me that sometimes, the most powerful response to betrayal isn't retaliation or even an apology, it's opening a door to change. The lie Natalie told in front of our entire family, intended to embarrass me, ended up triggering a turning point. In trying to reduce me, she unintentionally invited both of us into something deeper than success, honesty, healing, and genuine connection. That night, as we all gathered around the fire pit, siblings, cousins, parents, laughing over stories, toasting marshmallows, I took in the scene. Warm faces glowed in the firelight, and for once, there was no tension in the air. Just peace. The journey from silence to truth hadn't been linear. It had taken discomfort, risk, and vulnerability. But standing in that circle of warmth, I knew I wouldn't rewrite a single moment of it. What about you? Have you ever faced a crossroads in a complicated family relationship? Was there a moment that changed everything? Drop your stories in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder. The hardest moments often hold the seeds of transformation. Thank you for being here. And remember, sometimes, the path to healing begins with the moment meant to break you.